It's healthcare, not disease care. It's what, we should be doing is keeping people well and giving them tools to jump to whole new levels of health that they never really realised that they could have achieved.
Right, Alex, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, good, mate, good. This is nice.
This is great.
Welcome.
Yeah, and what a welcome you've given me. Even though it was tropical rain, monsoon season, in the outdoors, we did a little trot outside of your beautiful, beautiful home and the lovely green space that you've, cared for here, I feel.
Yeah, it's been sort of 5 years with no gardener, so I'm happy with that. It just gets all my movement done. I'm sorted. No gym for me.
Were you a gardener before you moved here?
Nope.
There you go.
Just
West London boy.
West London boy, come gardener.
Brilliant. I love
Happy
it.
days,
Did you
yeah.
take to that quite?
Loved it, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a bit more of a slash and burn man. I'm trying to learn more about it as I go along, but I love that, climbing trees and just tending. It's just very meditative. It's really it's so good for the mind.
And I often think when things they make sense through what we know to be good for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to kind of intellectualize it. I think we'll get into this a lot more, but just initially, I think sometimes intellectually it makes sense. And almost that's the precursor to doing things, because we are living in our heads so much. And as humans, we think, therefore we think first. So we almost have to think about things, and if they make sense to us, and then we're like, of course this is good for me.
Yeah.
And you have that conversation in your head. But if you just let all that go, that's you probably naturally gravitate to the garden that you have around you and tend to it because you care about your environment.
Yeah. And I think what's great about it is it's stacking one's life. And when you've got kids, that's one of the most important things. You just trying to separate it out. So especially as we'll chat about with like Nature Cure and things, this kind of multilateral approach to lifestyle, being outdoors, and if you can do stuff, you can stack a lot of things with your fresh air and your sunlight and your breathing techniques and your sort of meditative mind mood. You can get sun on your body. It's just so many aspects to it that you can do at once.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of splitting it up.
Absolutely. Katie Bowman, eat your heart out.
Yeah.
Movement snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we often think like, okay, we go to the gym, we'll do our movement, and then we don't have to move for the rest of the day. Well, we can get that done in our day.
Yeah, nutritious movement, shit like that.
Have you heard of Whole Food Movement by, what's his name? Rafe Kelly?
I haven't known it, yeah.
Do you know Rafe Kelly?
A little bit, no, not so much.
He's the Evolved Mood Play guy.
Okay.
And he's got all that going on, and I think very near what we were just talking about in Seattle. I'm sure it's like near there, somewhere. I mean, America's amazing because it has it feels like so many different continents in the same country, so many different kind of landscapes, and
totally,
you don't really think about that. But yeah, but anyway, well, let's backtrack slightly. So Alex, you are an osteopath, and you are a Nature Cure
lifestyle practitioner.
Yeah, you're a lifestylist, as we in our modern day term people that way, just to kind of get people to understand it a bit more. But yeah, perhaps give us a bit of an intro to I think Nature Cure is where we want to focus on, because I think that, and I'm so excited for this conversation because I didn't have to do any homework. I didn't have to get any writing any questions. I feel they're gonna come natural to me, and that's what makes for a good podcast. When just two people are just chatting about meaningful stuff, and in much of a flow. And I feel like you are on the same wavelength, and you're kind of an ideal person for me on the podcast. And then I started thinking about that, because obviously I want to, have the podcast and people kind of know what they're getting, and then also kind of they know what they're getting, but then they're not afraid to listen to someone who it's essentially about a whole life approach to health and getting people kind of on board that and looking into that in a lot more of like a holistic way, essentially. So someone like yourself and osteopaths, I think they have an approach, I'd call it, which is so much more at a fundamental level, just looking at the human body. I'm sure you'll put some analogies together, because I think you do that very well. But they look at the body in such of a, like an engineer would at a car, for example. And I think that's a beautiful way, because in the West, we've definitely, don't think anyone can disagree, that we've just dissected the complete different parts, and then we'll study that, and that'll be my life's work, to study this part. And it's just,
it's that reductionist approach.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's not really worked out too well, because when you separate everything becomes isolated, and you end up with a bit of a disconfiguration and a disconnection to everything else. So yeah, perhaps give us a little intro about Nature Cure and kind of what that really, gets to.
Yeah. So I suppose the way to start is to kind of say that in the 1700s, early 1800s, there was a massive health reform that occurred in both America and Central Europe. They were termed slightly differently. In Central Europe, it was more called Nature Cure, and in America, it was more termed Natural Hygiene. And they have very similar philosophies. There are few things that are quite different. But essentially it's understanding that the body has its own self-healing mechanism, and that we need an omni-lateral approach, a sort of multilateral approach to lifestyle, to put the person, the patient, the human, the animal, the plant in its optimum environment in which to live. And so Nature Cure started, let's say, in sort of Austria, sort of Vienna, sort of mountains throughout what would be now Czechoslovakia, or was Czechoslovakia, and through Central Europe. And there were many different Nature Cure practitioners that started to step away from that medical paradigm that at that time was a very intense version. If you go back sort of 200 years, what people were doing from the medical side.
There's a great museum called the Wellcome Collection in London. Have you been?
No, yeah.
They did a Henry Wellcome, a fascinating guy. But he had he's dead now, but there was a collection of all these medical prosthetic limbs and things they used to implements that they used to use for drilling holes,
like bloodletting and there was just it was pretty barbaric to say the least. And so several different Nature Cure practitioners, pioneers, lifestyle people of that time started taking people on and developing certain ways, whether it be like cold water therapy or heliotherapy, sunbathing, air bathing, but effectively trying to go back to a more natural environment. And that health reform, as I said, in Central Europe was called Nature Cure. Over in America, it was termed Natural Hygiene. And out of that area where people would have these huge health sanatoriums, where people would travel all over the world to get to their place when they had no medical options left. And they would have a complete sort of lifestyle treatment, and they would be cared for. And at that time, these were patients who had cholera or diphtheria or typhoid. It wasn't the bad backs or sore shoulders that people kind of see now modern therapists for. And within those places, they had what they would call mechanicotherapists or spinal therapists or naturopaths, like massage therapists. And it was out of that came, out of this very holistic, broad lifestyle care, came certain modalities such as osteopathy, chiropractic, hydrotherapy, dietetics, nutrition, for example, which in themselves are a huge science. But again, they're sort of focusing down on one specific aspect. And so it's important that, for example, for osteopaths, when osteopathy was coined in the very late 1800s and early 1890s, that was effectively, exactly as you said, taking the body and treating it as an architect would look at a building, or a plumber would look at a house, or an electrician, or a mechanic would look at a car. How do these bones and muscles and nerves and blood systems work together? And in its essence, osteopathy is the free flow of blood, nerve and lymph. If you take any pipe, hose, for example, and you create a small kink in the hose, you get a vast reduction of the flow. And anyone who's watered their garden will know what happens to the flow when there's a tiny kink in the hose pipe. But if that's an artery or an arterial or a small capillary bed that's allowing oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood to a cell, whether that be a cell in your big toe or a cell in your brain or a cell in one of the internal organs, if there is a compression or a lesion, let's say, of one of those pipes, there's a dramatic reduction in the flow at the end. So effectively, one of the main terms of osteopathy was the rule of the artery is supreme. Are the cells of the body, wherever they are, receiving oxygen, nutrient-rich blood? Mm-hmm. At the same time that any cell is then producing waste byproducts of metabolism. Mm-hmm. And so it needs a way of taking effectively rubbish away from your house,
into the lymphatic system.
Yeah, and there's we get this venous return of deoxygenated blood that's going back, and you get the lymphatic system, which is taking the excess fluid that has come in via the arteries, and there's a slight excess of tissue fluid that then gets returned via the lymphatic system, which again is a sort of cleaning mechanisms. But again, if you create a kink or a compression within those venous or lymphatic systems, you get a huge backup, and like a traffic jam, suddenly you have this real congestion within the tissues, and those tissues are then sitting in metabolic waste, effectively. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if you take the nerves, you've got a compression of those nerves. You can think of that nerve coming from that central nervous system out, and there's light bulbs in all of the cells at the end, and then effectively you get a fuse being turned off, or the switch being turned off, or the wire being disrupted in some way, and the light starts to fail. So you've got this kind of analogy of like reduction of nutrient-rich blood, or you've got a reduction of waste being taken away, or a reduction of the energetic nerve force which is going to the tissues. And then on top of that, you then have this skeletal structure, which is effectively the weight-bearing structures of a building, supported by a three-dimensional tensegrity structure, fascial system, which is holding it up. And so really osteopathy was looking at a building and saying that is a leaning Tower of Pisa and it's leaning over, and if there's a huge storm or an earthquake, that's the way it's going to fall. So the body is providing struts, and it's providing ropes, and it's providing tension lines to hold that body up. Or if we're going to build a huge building, these are the ways that we need to place the bones and where that would be, for example.
Because the inevitable is going to happen. You're going to get ill. Yeah. We all get ill.
Yeah.
And it's what happens when that storm comes.
Exactly.
How do we respond to it?
Yeah, how we respond in that sense, especially with gravity. Gravity is just such a force. Mm-hmm. So the osteopathic version is obviously thinking people osteopaths, that's just osteo, it's bones. And yes, of course the bones are. Is
that what osteo means?
Yeah, osteo bones. So therapy of the bones, and Andrew Taylor Still, who coined osteopathy in Kirksville, was a medical doctor, and he'd spent many years, but he'd lost a lot of patients. And then when he finally lost his several of his children, I think his wife as well, to meningitis, he realized that his Pandora's box of medicines were no good really anymore. And so effectively he was a mechanic at heart. He'd had a huge amount of history within natural lifestyle setting. He was born in around this kind of natural hygienic philosophy, and effectively started doing just crazy amounts of autopsies and looking at bodies and looking at the body as a mechanic would do a car, and looking at the wiring and seeing where the disruption had occurred. Yeah. And so then we get this very sort of pragmatic, very mechanical aspect to looking at the body. Whereas that nature cure is that going back outwards, that much more holistic version of saying, yes, that's how the structural aspect works, but then there's kind of this vital force, soul, life, breath, energetic, whatever that life force is that's with somebody that departs, and then you still have all the mechanics left over, but there's no life force. But that vital force is always asking the body or telling the body or creating the body a way of doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Moving away from
it's trying to, and always trying to heal, and always doing the best with what it's got. And when it has issues, it will create, let's say, inflammations, or it will create healing responses that we have in this modern day world seen as a bad thing, or the thing that's going wrong, rather than it's an inflammation in order to try and deal with the process.
It's like the autoimmune, people who have autoimmune diseases, they think like the body is attacking them. And that's where language comes in, which doesn't really serve us, because it's not. Your body's actually protecting itself. It's shutting things down to protect other things. So, you can look at it both ways, but so the right way is it's actually really protecting itself. It's not trying to kill you. Your body's never trying to kill you.
No. I mean, we it's time I say with patients, if you could be a monk living up a hill, pure air, pure water, pure nutrition, mental thought, in a let's say perfect environment.
Purified mind.
Yeah, perfect environment. And then you could have Joe Bloggs living a very unhealthy lifestyle, but those two humans have the same organs of elimination in the body. They have their skin, their lungs, their kidneys, their liver, their uterus if they're a female. And those organs are there in order to take eliminative toxic matter out of the body. And in an ideal world, we would live in a world where we would have very little, if any, environmental toxins. Paints, strippers, air pollution, water pollution, diet. We would not be taking any of those pollutants or those toxins into the body. But those organs are there to deal with the metabolic byproducts. They're endogenous products rather than exogenous toxins. You still have to breathe, and you still have to be. You're still producing uric acid and carbon dioxide and lactic acid, and these byproducts of elimination. They're very easily dealt with by these organs. But then, of course, as we increase the amount of toxic waste that's produced by the body, let's say by over-exercising or by being really, really stressed, or not getting enough sleep, or not getting enough sunlight, or not drinking enough water, for example, or you producing more endogenous toxins, or you're in a lifestyle or an environment where you're taking in a lot more exogenous toxins, whether that's by imbibing what you're drinking, what you're eating, what you're breathing, the air, or just the amount of environmental toxins that, as I said, anything from the plastics or the paint strippers or the pollutants that are outside. And so the body suddenly has to deal with this increasing number of toxic matter. And there are genetic issues, there are organ issues. We're all slightly different inside. Our vitality, our battery life is different inside. But effectively, that toxic build-up occurs, and it produces this thing called toxemia, which is toxins in the blood in the body. And the body has a great way of trying to store that stuff away within the soft tissues, the fat tissues, the joint tissues. But when those organs, and I sort of say to patients, think of them as a sink, and think of the toxic matter, whether you're taking it in or it's coming from within inside of you, as a number of taps. As you turn on more and more taps, there comes a point where the sink can't cope, and so that sink starts to overflow. And that overflow is where the body creates what they call an acute eliminative effort. So it shows up in the skin as eczema or psoriasis or bumps and spots and those kind of things. It comes up in the lung tissue, from the back of your throat all the way down into your lungs. And that could be asthma or bronchitis or laryngitis. It goes into the digestive system.
Cysts, is that something that's toxic and kind of something's... It's a signal, or...
It might be a signal of what's going on underneath and what your body would do in order to start the elimination process. And so again, it's then what the body is trying to do, and alongside of these acute eliminative reactions, we have these overall things that the body does in order to look after one when one's in this acute crisis. So it increases your metabolic rate and it increases your temperature because it's got to get the furnace going.
Sure.
And it removes your appetite so that you don't spend over half of your daily energy digesting the food that you're going to have, because it's got other things to be dealing with. And it creates a lethargy so that you don't expend energy. It's a conservation of vital force at that time, because your body's going into a process of burning up this toxic matter and using these organs of elimination. So there's analogies, but I use the analogy of a house, or
I had to hear that a couple of times, great. But it's a phenomenal analogy.
It's a great one. It's like, houses, if you either you buy a really run-down house and it's been really uncared for years, or you're just you never clean your house, for example, and every time that there's rubbish around, you stuff it in cupboards or you stuff it away in certain areas, and we all know how that is, and you think, oh, I've got to get to that, I've got to get to the cupboard, or I've got to sort out the garage, or I really want to deep clean. And so what the body's great at doing is trying to manage this all the way through. But there are certain times where when one provides the right environment, it is able to start to clear up the mess on the floor, and generally clean the house. And this is where all these lifestyle issues that we can talk about, which are ways that people can increase or lower the toxemia in their lives, increase their amount of vitality, and effectively detox their body. And what your body's doing at that same time is collecting all the rubbish and either taking it outside and just getting ready for a bonfire, but it just doesn't light it straight away because it's just thinking, I'm going to build up the bonfire before I light it. And then at a certain point, your body decides, okay, now's the time, the right kind of conditions outside, I'm going to light the bonfire. And when that bonfire occurs, that's when the fever kicks off. It's when the loss of appetite, it's when the inflammation, it's where the skin or the lungs or the joints or those things kick off. And when one understands it as this burning up of toxic matter and this actual inflammation that's there to heal, we can then use a lot of things in order to just support the body rather than to suppress it.
Could you give an example of perhaps what the bonfire would almost represent, or like you're putting your body into an environment to allow it to feel safe, probably first.
Yeah.
To then that there's an area, we know the house is protected from the bonfire, so it's safe to light this fire. It's not too close, And then what the bonfire? That's the kind of it's obviously the environment as well, but it's also the toxins coming out, isn't it? It's that the setting, I guess, of all those things to kind of come out through the skin, through all these organs that you're talking about.
So I mean, it's delving deep now, but it effectively is what I like to try and call the 3 different types of crisis, and they are very different. So if we take a disease crisis first of all, that is one where it hasn't come about through healthy detoxification or lifestyle changes. So people quite often have this after, Christmas time or Easter time or Halloween, where they're eating a lot of junk or stag do's or big parties, those kind of things, where they might already be quite toxic. Their body's already the saturated, the sinks are already full. That feeling that you get when this person says, oh, if I think I'm going to go out today, or I'm burning the candle at both ends, but I just feel it doesn't feel quite right. I think if I do this, I could be not very well next week. And you go out and you drink the wrong things and you eat the wrong things and you stay out too late and blah, blah, blah. And the body just has to go into what we call a disease crisis. It has to go into an element of detoxification of a heightened energy, because if it's not, it's a risk to life. The body can't deal with these poisons going around in the body.
It sounds intense when you call it a crisis, but from what we can relate to, what is a crisis like for your body? That is.
It's a hangover.
Your body is in shock. It's in malnourishment, like dehydration, like all these things are. It's a toxic, right?
Yeah. It's always, like I said, I've had these few weeks off at Christmas, haven't any sun night, been sitting around, I've just been eating wrong things and drinking the wrong things, and then comes January and you feel awful. So this disease crisis is, as I said, like when the person wakes up and this is something that if it wasn't to happen, the acute would become chronic. So the body just says, I don't want to keep these things within the body, because if I have to deal with this, I can't keep it in the bloodstream. I've got to keep dumping it into the tissues. And so the acute becomes chronic. And the body is always trying to go from the chronic towards the acute because it's the only way. So it's got to create some cleaning. So you just decide, you go to the house is a complete mess, and you get some cleaners in. And if you came in, there'd be dust everywhere, there'd be rubbish bags, and you'd be thinking, what is going on? But if then you see it afterwards, it's gone through a cleaning process, then everything's been packaged, removed from the house. That's the elimination. And then everything's much cleaner. Okay, so that's a disease crisis. The second one is a sort of treatment crisis. That's one where you're in a maybe poor state of health, or you're quite saturated with these toxins, and you go along for a couple of hours massage, or you go along for some Reiki, or you go along for some acupuncture, or some osteopathy, or different things. And the more toxic you are, the more careful you have to be, because effectively, what the therapist is trying to do on these multitude of different ways is to remove blockages from the body and to improve the circulation and improve the energy flow and improve the mechanics and improve all these things. But effectively, what it does is it takes the sluice gates and just opens them up. You get this release, you get this drop of adrenaline, which is keeping all of the toxins in the tissues. It makes them feel supported, so they feel safe. Start to breathe. Yeah. They start to relax, and then you might have this treatment, whether it's like I said, massage or physical treatment that physically lets some of these toxins hit the bloodstream. But that's the analogy, is then taking this messy house that's already really messy and going to the big cupboard that's got everything in it and just opening up the cupboard, and all the rubbish hits the floor. And you're suddenly in a state where you just can't cope. The body can't cope, and so it tips into a crisis. And this can be sometimes where people go for a treatment and they wake up the following morning and they can't get off the loo, or they've got a raging fever, or they're feeling really sick, or they're suddenly dealing with this huge amount of toxemia that is in the blood. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's really hard to manage. Or it can be hard to manage. And it's where a lot of people sometimes go, I went for some treatment, and just the effect afterwards. And maybe sometimes the therapist doesn't understand that, or the person phones up and then says, this is really bad. I really cough, I feel awful, got temperature of whatever number, and this is the way I feel. And hopefully at that point we need to find ways of supporting that person, rather than saying, I'll just take some suppressive medication, because it's just trying to stuff everything back in the cupboard. But at the same time, it's much more difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. So that's the treatment crisis. And the third one is a true healing crisis. And a true healing crisis is turning up at the house and seeing that it's full of junk, and realizing that in order to get to those really bad cupboards at the back, or really to be able to deal with the deeper level of chronic disease, chronic toxic holding, the one has to do some kind of superficial cleaning, some irrigation of the land, some just general kind of maintenance to get the place in a place where you can then open the cupboard. Mm-hmm. And that is these lifestyle changes that people quite often do in January after the Christmas. I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to start eating some right food, I'm going to start going to your yoga class, I'm going to start running, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to deal with the family. I've been, divorce, or I'm leaving. Yeah, exactly. 30 days of cold showers, and all of these ways. But by doing this, you reduce that toxic matter coming from inside, and you from the outside, and your body just has a chance to irrigate, to just generally clean. And this is the person in the early few weeks that just says, I'm feeling better, I'm going through the sugar withdrawal or the caffeine withdrawal, or the detoxification that people are most used to, giving up sugar or alcohol. This general cleaning continues. And then there comes a point at which the body just decides, okay, I've now got to a phase where I'm ready. I'm now ready to open up Pandora's box. I can now open up the cupboard. And that's the time when the person just really randomly, just one night, I just feel a bit febrile. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to, you wake up in the morning and a joint is swollen up, or their skin has, sort of come out in a rash, or they're sitting on the toilet and they're feeling quite unwell. And they're going into this acute eliminative effort, but it's come from within side of the body. The body's decided, I've got to a point where I've generally cleansed, I've cleaned a lot of the tissues, and now I can open up. And now I can set fire to the bonfire. Now I can open up that cupboard, and we can spill out all of this rubbish and cobwebs and dust and mold, and it can hit the floor, and we can be in an area that's ready to mop it all up and clean it all up and package it and put it and remove it from the body. Mm-hmm. And that's a true healing crisis. That's when you're making lifestyle changes on a myriad of things over a period of time that's sustainable. We're generally cleaning our body. We're improving ourselves on many different levels, physical, mental, and emotional. And then we can hit those crisis moments, and we can have physical, mental, and emotional kind of outbursts where the body then it's the time that it can be there. But it's not being forced, it's not being pushed, you've not been told to do it, you've not opened up without any kind of preparatory work. Yeah. And that is where this sort of nature cure stuff comes in, where it is trying to give what we call like the physiological requirements of life, what the body actually requires to work on a daily body. And it's the same way if you brought me I'm a gardener, a better one than I am, and you brought a myriad of different plants then each plant would have a certain climate and a certain type of environment that it would want to live in. In the same way that if you brought a polar bear to a Californian zoo, you know, is it supposed to bathe in the sunshine all the time and eat avocados? Well, it will survive and it will adapt as best as it can, but it's not going to reach its potential level of health. It has a certain type of diet, a certain type of environment that it's supposed to live in. And that's the kind of same with the human, you know, the type of environment that we should be in.
So what is the type of environment we should be in? Drop that one in there.
Yeah. Well, it's one which is sustainable with our environment, so it's quite easy to first of all think, if you take away electricity and you take away fire and you take away refrigeration and you take away your clothes, where you would want to be. You know,
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. I've not heard it in that. You know, like, that stripping away of everything.
Take away everything.
Where do you want to go? What do you want to?
Yeah, you tend to be. You know, you'll end up in the tropics. You'll end up somewhere within that tropical environment where it's warm enough to live with very few clothes.
So you'd go south for the winter.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I'd be south all the time. If it wasn't for friends and family and lifestyle and everything, I would definitely live. And as the lifestyle we have as an HQ, the people who thrive the best live in those kind of environments. Because you get your daily amounts of sunshine, you know, in an environment where we wouldn't have polluted water, we would be drinking rainwater or from lovely rivers and fresh water. But you'd be having daily amounts of sunshine. You'd have year-round fruit and vegetable that would be grown. You'd have the right lifestyle. That environment, those basic essentials of warmth, light, nutrition, food, being able to sleep outside all year round.
Yeah, quite simple.
And as we go further and further away from that, we find that we have a lack, and we have to adapt to our environment. You know, we have a lack of sunshine, and with the lack of sunshine, we have a lack of food that comes in the winter months. And so we have to find ways of adapting our lifestyle in order to store enough food to get through the winter months. And so people would say, oh, you know, how about Alaska, for example, or, you know, areas that Alaska, like the Antarctica, you know, Eskimos, you know, what about them? They don't live on bananas and tropical fruit. Like, well, yeah, that's true, but their longevity is difficult. They have to adapt, so they will have seal blubber and they will have whales, and I mean, nowadays it's totally different because they can have McDonald's. Sure. And the lifestyle has completely changed. But what I'm saying is our body has a way to adapt in the same way that you can just survive on Coca-Cola and Doritos and Mars bars and just eat those things for years. It won't outrightly immediately kill you. It will produce a slow degradation of your tissues and a slow increase of toxemia, but your body will adapt. It will manage it in the same way that if you don't have any food whatsoever, you will eat anything. You will eat bugs, everything else, but it's not the optimum conditions.
Sure. I think people know that. I mean, it's simple at the end of the day, isn't it? And I know you've got your 8 principles, which I'd love to go into, and movement's one, but I think we'll save that for last. I think people do know this. They know the sugars. It's just, for me, it's like, all right, how can you do this a lot better than me? You're very articulate, and you know, you kind of have to be, because you get a certain amount of time with someone. You need to express exactly what's going on in the situation, and with someone. I think I'm on a journey personally to articulate this stuff in a very compassionate and non-judgmental and a really articulate way. To help people, because I see a lot of suffering. I see a lot of people struggling. I see a lot of people not feeling good. And there's a myriad of ways of why that is, because we have come so far in our world, and now we're looking back really to figure out why. Something's wrong, something's not quite right. And again, myriad of ways that is. But let's just talk about health. I think I want to help people more, and I really ask myself, a 5-hour drive, like, how can I help people? Like, in my head, like, really trying to get to this like premise of like what will really help people, because people will be listening to this and they'll be like, sure, I have sugar, it's convenient, really. And I think we're at this kind of, I don't know if it's a crossroads or a one-way street. Like the convenience is so powerful,
Of course.
And I feel like it's ingrained in us to produce these technologies that make life easy, simple. And it feels like that's what we're giving birth to, like everything else that comes next that's efficient, that's simple. And I know I'm going off on a way, but stay with me. And I feel like convenience really comes at our detriment, doesn't it, at health? Because things are, who wants to shop, have organic food? It costs that little bit more, and it's convenient for me. It's convenient for my bank and other things I want to have the cheaper options. And it's like, how do I? Because I understand it, and I really prize value. I think it does come down to values at the end of the day. What do you value? What do you prioritize? Because convenience comes at a cost. Perhaps you could unwrap that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most people tend to go for the financial aspect of nutrition, and they are right because of this adaptation. So unless you have a very large garden and if you're growing a lot of your own food, but even in the case of that, if you're growing a lot of your own food, it's still quite difficult in the winter months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
have you seen Big Little Farm?
Yeah.
No. Did you introduce me to that documentary? You have to watch it.
Yeah.
It's about a kind of a natural organic farm in America. It took, I won't ruin it for anyone, but definitely see it. It's phenomenal if you're interested in organic farming, the regenerative soil, really living off the land in its purest form. So it's this couple who moved out of the city and they started, it's beautiful photography as well. The documentary is shot because the guy was a nature photographer. And he captured the 7 years of them going from nothing to, they moved to a desert and then they went through the whole process. It took them 7 years to really get a good relationship with the ecosystem to allow things to thrive.
Proper permaculture. It's like those. It's a food forest. It's sort of like different tiered layers, and there are so many people out there who are making those big changes. But yeah, I mean, nutrition is a big thing as far as cost is concerned, and I would say us as a family, our biggest outgoing is providing that organic produce. Yeah.
And what's the motivation then? Because for me, my motivation is I know what it's like to feel good.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to feel like thrive, empowered, feel like I have everything I need, and just wake up in the morning with energy. And
that's it. It's just sustainability, and
it's
quality as well as quantity of life, ability to be able to reach one's own potential. That's it. But food is the most expensive. The rest of those can be achieved on quite a short or a small budget, but it just takes education and information, as we talked about. Yeah, you can spend a lot of money on some really expensive gyms, but you can do a lot of ground living and general 3-dimensional movement in your life without doing that. And if you've got kids or if you've got a dog or you spend out time outside, you can introduce very basic things that make a very vast difference to your body.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I'm not. I haven't got a lot of money in my bank, but I feel like wealth is health, and that's what I put a lot of my time into.
I think sometimes as well, what's quite nice is that when one looks at this, as I said, omni-lateral approach, there are some times that we can the person can see where they're doing extremely well in some of those aspects, but they're massively lacking in many of the others.
Sure.
And so that's why sometimes you get certain therapies or certain changes that some people are like, oh, this made all the difference for me. But if you gave that to 10 people, it might make all the difference in 2 or 3 people. And so covering all your bases is what's much more healthy, And so if you take any center around the world which is halting or reversing chronic diseases, it's not just a one system approach. It's a multitude. And so as we said, there's, let's say, 8 factors. It's going to be daily amounts of sunshine on your skin, and also in a place in the environment where you're going to have enough rays of power to produce vitamin D. So for example, now we're going into the 6 months, or we're in now the 6 months where even if you have a really sunny day or you're sitting in your conservatory in the UK, you won't get the rays of the power in the sun which will provide the body's ability to metabolize vitamin D.
Right.
So it's like, and you can research this unless you're in the latitude or within the tropical environment and certain latitude above it, where you get that all year round. You're going into a severe malnourishment effectively of the sun. And alongside of that, just simple vitamin D, then you just have calcium absorption and use, so that's just bones and bodies and tissues and everything else. But daily amounts of sunshine, fresh unpolluted water, the right kind of nutrition or diet, which is where everyone wants to go to.
Which the water does cost as well, in terms of
the water.
How do you do that? First of all, because the sun's quite easy to understand, but then I know people that they still think tap water's the way to go, and
it's
largely not.
Again, within that, there's a spectrum from drinking your tap water to having a tabletop filter system, like a Brita water system, through to sort of reverse osmosis, to a a distiller, where effectively it's producing pure H2O, which would in the old days have been rainwater effectively. But nowadays you can't do that because of the amount of toxic pollution in the air. But for ourselves, we create lots of distilled water for the family, and if we can, we would then sunbathe that water. That can be done relatively cheaply. Sun's coming out for us.
Can feel it.
Okay, there's that daily sunshine we need.
There's that daily sun.
Sun, water, clean air, the right diet. Then there's the rest and sleep, the amount you're sleeping, the amount that you're resting. Daily amounts of movement. Don't call it exercise. It's moving of your body, but people would normally call that exercise.
So do you know Gray Cook? Have you heard of Gray? Yeah. And he was, I think he was doing a presentation to Google, and he did this with his hand. And for everyone listening, I'm making a circle with my fist and thumb. So that's exercise. And now I'm drawing a circle with my finger around my whole body. Yeah. That is movement.
Exactly. And that's why I say, it's low grade, high repetitious, 3-dimensional movement within different planes. And so we get that through walking, climbing, gardening, swimming, general movements. Which are natural. And so, yes, you can join your yoga class, and yes, you can do lots of different mobility, but you can do this on the floor, you can do this by being outside.
I'll tell you this now, though, I've been practicing yoga for, a very good 3 years was like a very intense period where I was practicing a lot. And then I got to find more into natural movement, and then I realised I couldn't squat. Now, how can someone practicing yoga for 3 years not really having awareness of the deep squat, or sure there's Malasana. It doesn't find its way into many yoga sequences that I used to do. Yeah. But if I have no relationship with the ground, I'm practicing yoga. It's kind of it's detrimental, and that's how a lot of people get injured. Yeah,
and like I said, it's like hanging, or body weight strength. Can you climb a tree? Can you kind of jump out of the tree? It's a multitude of factors, but that's that movement side of things. And then there's the spinal integrity side, and the spinal integrity side is the mechanical side. That's the type of thing where the kind of the therapeutic part kicks in, which is that sort of osteopathic, chiropractic side of looking at the way that the mechanics of the body are effectively working.
Sure.
And the last one then is your mental thought, your positive mental attitude, the way that you're thinking in order to deal with the stress and those kind of situations. And actually the last one which is the 9th, which is just that removal of toxic matter from your environment and detoxifying yourself from inside. So very occasionally with people who are chronically diseased, like getting them to just run very long distances or going to the gym is too much. They'll produce a load of lactic acid, which tips them over into the thing. So I said, you can have people who are doing really well on the movement side, or you can do people who are doing really well on the nutritious side, or doing very well with their meditation, but they're lacking in the other aspects. And so sometimes you can just take 10%, 20% of everything and make those adjustments, rather than just remove the
Why do you think that is? At its core, why do you think people tend to really go hard into one area?
I suppose it's just things that people are drawn towards. Sometimes it's lifestyle and what can happen in the family. Very often it's, I would love to make those changes, but my wife or my family or my husband or my kids or where I live or money or those kind of things, that you realise, I live in a place and I can't move, and there is a total lack of sunshine. How am I going to get around that for 6 months of the year?
Mm-hmm.
Or money is a big factor. How can I make that nutrient dense plant-based food come about if I don't have anywhere to grow it? So there are some of those, and other times we like to focus on the thing that goes easy for us, and not deal with the thing that our body might be shouting for or required. But again, we're talking about there's difference, isn't there, between taking someone who's pretty mobile, pretty fit, and how you reach a new level of health, and then there's how you take someone who's got to quite a chronic state of health, and how you're going to bring them back to it. So again, that's where we go back to the, it's great to do all the good things when you're feeling not so well, all the things you're doing when you're feeling great.
Yeah,
but it's
really
also, it's what you do when you're feeling ill. It's what you do when you hit that acute crisis. It's what you do when you've got a disease crisis or a treatment crisis or a healing crisis, that you understand that this is a process to do some major jumping, major cleaning in your lifestyle. And that's where it's like, from a mental perspective, people can understand that you go through some quite difficult times when you're bringing up some issues from the past, but it's through that you're able to adjust and integrate and then come outside of it, and then you look back on that part as, actually, that was a really good cleaning part. And it's the same thing, and we understand that as a process when someone's coming off some very heavy drugs or heroin or things, they're sweating and they're breathing and they're pooing and they're being and they're in a room and they're screaming, all those, that's fine. That's, we kind of understand that from certain aspects.
Yeah.
Or when someone's coming off some major addictions, we kind of see that.
Sure.
But when we're making these little lifestyle changes, or we're adapting with our environment, that's when it's really important to have this kind of overall view, because it's when your kid's got a fever, it's when you feel unwell. And it's listening to the body. It's teaching us that our body is telling us what we need to do, but we've become so accustomed to not listen to it, or to think of any of those things as something that we shouldn't have, and so we suppress it. We've got used to looking for suppressive measures, and that can be alternative as well as pharmaceutical, to just ignore the problem. And it is a lot harder to make these changes, but for those people who want, you can have absolutely humongous changes. That's not to say that you won't come across the people who have left it too long, who have gone too far, because it's like a mechanic, like you can drive your car like a Formula 1 car, but if you've got a very, very old or very smashed up or very poor quality car, things are going to start dropping off. The difference is you can kind of go and replace a lot of those things that mechanic. The body does have a way of replacing it but it gets slower and slower as we get older, and it gets a lot more difficult.
Yeah. I love the analogy that it really resonated with me. When you said, it was in the We Move podcast, that you said, and I just started firstly laughing for some reason, but I just love that way of looking, stepping out of your body. And if you looked at your body and you thought of it as a building, you probably wouldn't want to go in there because it's safe. And I'm like, yeah, there's definite. I was time lapsing someone the other day, and I was like, that position I'm in right there, probably unsafe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go in there if I was building.
Like literally, if you imagine buying a completely dilapidated building and there'd been like squatters in there for years, and it was just mouldy and dusty, and there were like rodents and parasites, and like you'd go in there and you'd think, okay, like and people's bodies are like that. People's bodies are carrying huge amounts of waste in it, and the vital force of the body might have been suppressed so many times that it's become really dulled and numbed, and it's not really showing itself. And actually, the more chronic you are, the less you won't have these acute crises. Acute crises are more vibrant young children and going through life where the body's just like, okay, I really need to do something about this. But when it's got to a point that the building is so dilapidated, it just says, like, actually, if I light a bonfire outside, like, this is going to be bad. Maybe this is good. It's like this is unmanageable. I don't have anyone to help this. The building's going to fall down. And a lifestyle nature cure approach is kind of just deciding, I'm buying this house, but I'm going to just gut it. And when you gut it and you get these 20 builders that turn around and just rip everything out right back to the bare bones, and all of this dust and rubbish is coming out, that's not the time to panic and be like, guys, this is awful, just put it back in the house, which is effectively what suppressive action is. It's just kind of going, don't deal with the tiredness, don't deal with the inflammation, don't deal with the body trying to do it, don't try and understand why the body's doing what it's doing, don't deal with the things that you're doing to it or putting around it or putting in it or doing, just chemically or alternatively stop it. Have another Red Bull, just don't fall asleep, just keep going, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
So when you have that lifestyle change and you decide to do this revamp of the body, you're going to gut it. You're going to have all of these builders coming in your home, in your house that is your body, and it will start clearing out junk. But that junk, if there's lots of it, has got to come out of your body somewhere. It just doesn't disappear. So we can't start detoxifying, making these lifestyle jumps, and just expect to just get healthier and healthier and healthier and healthier, and without certain times where the body just goes, okay, I've got those horrible crystals in my gouty toe, I've got those horrible things deep within the subcutaneous fat of my abdomen, I've got all of these medications I've taken for years and years, and all those things I took as a child to suppress my skin and to suppress my asthma and to suppress my guts and my colitis, and all these drugs I've taken. There's so much stored within the body tissue that you decide to change your diet and start going to AA meetings, stop drinking, and do some meditation and start moving your body. You start dusting. So a load of cleaners you get going around your body cleaning. And we have to understand that then there's a body just going, okay, then we've got a healing mechanism. That's when the powerful blood and the powerful nerve force comes in, and then we just understand it. And then actually what one can do is you can advise people that you're going to make these changes, they're going to feel better and better, and you're going to be there. But at some point, they're going to have some acute episodes. And when that happens, you're going to be there to support, and you're going to be able to listen to the body. And the more that they've done the groundwork, the more that they will be able to understand that they can fall into that episode of doing what their body wants to do, which is effectively curl up, stay warm, drink water, stop eating food, and just go to bed. And you're there to supportively do that. And that is why the more one can do, rather than ignoring those factors that the person doesn't want to change their lifestyle, doesn't want to change their diet, but you think, I'm going to wade in and do something from the outside, and that's where the ego kicks in. And I suppose the first several years of my osteopathic life outside of the world, where I had a sort of the osteopathic philosophy there, but the osteopathy had changed in its teaching, so it didn't involve all of that nature cure stuff from the dietetics and the fasting and the hydrotherapy and the heliotherapy and how to care for someone who's effectively in a bed really unwell. And so that ego at the beginning is all of these things that you can really do as a mechanic. You can go in there and move tissues around, and you can unblock the hose pipes. I'm going to get the rule, the rule of the artery is supreme. I'm going to get fresh, oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood. But then I would say, but then later on you realize, but what if the blood is filled with junk? What if you open up all of these arteries? What if you open up all the sluice gates, but actually it's all filled with just horrible toxic matter? Then effectively you flood the tissues with all of this stuff. You're not taking just nutrient-rich blood. You might be just releasing a lot of toxic stuff. So that's when suddenly you have to take this step back, and actually the more chronic you go, the more you need to make these bigger lifestyle changes and these bigger things to kind of clear up the debris, to do the dusting around the houses before you deal with the sort of deeper layered chronic held toxic stuff.
How, do you often find people come see you last? You're the last person they come see. They've tried everything else, and you're the policeman at the door. They've tried the council, they've tried this, and now you're visiting the bad neighbourhood, which no one else is. You've got that. Everyone's coming to you. Does it feel like you're kind of alternative to some people, and they've just tried everything else, or do you find what avenues do you find people find you? And
word of mouth.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, just it's always I've always gone through word of mouth rather than advertising, just simply because it's very old school, a lot of this stuff, but it's what tends to happen is people find you and something happens, and the initial complaints where they come through the door, they kind of suddenly realise actually there's a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of tend to say to people, look, come and see me 3 times as an osteopath. For example, that was the majority of my career being an osteopath. And at the end of that, you'll realise that actually I can be here to support you for as much as you want to change, because it's you that's doing the changing. It's not me. I can't change your body. I can't make you a not diabetic. I can't make you a not. I can't take away these things, but I can teach you how to employ these things in your lifestyle that will do it all for yourself. And so it starts off sometimes with people coming structurally for osteopathy, but really what ends up happening is all of the people come to me who are there to look for this lifestyle nature cure overall approach, because they want to lose weight and feel healthier and get rid of this chronic condition, or do this, but without just going down or they've tired, or they've come to the end of their medicative route kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then quite often you'd start treating one, and then you're treating then the husband and the kids, or you come with a baby, and then suddenly you're treating all the other children, and it becomes a family thing. And then it's how you can what I like to do is empower people with these tools that they can then just take forth, where they become their own doctor. They become, the best physician is one who can hear, who can give the right advice over the phone, where you don't have anything.
Hopefully
what do you
don't
do?
See him again.
How do you do? Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not a good business model.
Well, no, actually, what happens is you see, it's the reverse.
But
like it's actually the reverse, because like it used to be
There's
like
plenty of sick people out
well,
there.
it used to be like osteopathic college, right? Was the medicalized osteopathic version, but like don't open Pandora's box. Just deal with the low back that they come into. Just try and make that better. Don't deal with their major issues of lifestyle or diet or cardiovascular issues, or their unhappiness at home and their job and all of these things. Just deal with the small thing and send them away.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of like you offer them like the world is your oyster. We can go as far with this as you like, and it just depends how much. Some people just want to have that little bit of a quick fix, and you can, but sometimes you're not able to put that little band-aid on something when the river banks are bursting,
Sure. And you mentioned a positive mental attitude. So how much do you find emotion plays the part, or maybe not the part, but a huge significant part in, and how does that kind of how do people release that? Because a lot of what I find emotion releases in stretching and moving my body in different ways, exploring, expressing.
Yeah.
And I feel like emotion's moving through me, and then it comes out almost like a detoxification of some trapped emotion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's your battery, isn't it? It's like that internal vitality. I say like that kind of thing. There's the mechanics on the outside, and then there's your vital force on the inside. And then we can go down that. Like people, consciousness, soul, where that where that energy is coming from.
Is it Rajesh Patel, Vital Force? Is that the book?
Yeah. I think so. I don't know that one.
There's one called Vital Force. This Indian woman. Yeah, good book.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you're asking about the mind. For me, it's been a really lovely journey over the last 20 years, because I suppose when I went into the osteopathic college at the beginning, it was the mechanical side.
Yeah, it seems that way. Looking into the history of it, it's very biomechanical.
It's become it over the last 30 years. Obviously, as I said, osteopathy in the early 1900s was a sort of full total therapeutic modality in itself, and until the sort of late 90s or 90s, it was really unrecognised as far as the medical profession and those. So it was extremely private, alternative schools of what the medical side would call quackery. And quackery, so I was
a bit cultish, perhaps.
Yeah, I was my parents were very famous ballet dancers. Yes. And when they got injured, and the doctor would say, take these painkillers and take the next few weeks off, they would, they're on at the Opera House, they're at Covent Garden or the Colosseum that night. It's not possible, they're in a principal role, they're going back on, so they would go, and I would be taken along to these kind of weird little places and huts and warm places where this person would do some work on them and get them back on stage. And I just knew when I was about 14 that I had a desire to help people and heal, and I think I was drawn to that. And so I went along to the osteopathic college, which at that time was in Trafalgar Square, and it was just full of like 40-year-olds, 30 to 40, 50-year-olds who had just gone through crises in their life and then just rediscovered what they wanted to do. They didn't want to be a banker, they didn't want to be this, they didn't want to be a lawyer, they wanted to and they'd found osteopathy, because really I was at a very nice school in West London, and the curricular department, or people just didn't know what an osteopath was. So I chose my GCSEs and A-levels, but I kind of went into it more, I suppose, from that mechanical side. However, those osteopaths that had supported our family had also stopped several of us from having emergency operations, because they had diagnosed it as much better and treated and helped treat the family.
Wow.
And then when I went into the college, there was by that time, when I was like 18, it had suddenly become recognised, and so a lot of school leavers had come in. That the age had radically dropped. It had become like UCAS registered, but it was through that registration process to become like a university, effectively, that a lot of legal or a lot of restraining factors on some of the old philosophies had been extra lost. And so it had become a very mechanical type therapy. And I was very lucky to be at a time when some of the other schools that were closing were very old school osteopathic colleges who maintained that philosophy and maintained that whole overall treatment perspective and bringing in some of that old nature cure stuff. Mm-hmm. But effectively, what I was saying is starting off with the body as the mechanics and becoming like a super mechanic for a car, but to the body. And then taking on these old school osteopathic philosophies and nature cure philosophies in these early days. And it was couple of years after I first qualified, when my dad had pancreatic cancer, and we were away. We'd actually got engaged, me and my wife. We'd been away. I came back, and he was already 4 days into sort of like medical intervention, and I didn't know enough of the people in order to offer him anything alternative or supportive. So I just had to hold his hand and go along, even though it was very much against what my beliefs and my philosophy were.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was, I graduated 17, it was about 15 years ago, something like that.
I forget you're 40.
Yeah, with a young baby face.
Yeah. Vibrant.
I gotta
young.
Go and try and get ID'd somewhere. Can't even grow a beard. Can't even grow a proper beard. But like, that suddenly realised that the techniques I had in order to be that plumber, electrician, mechanic to the body didn't take away for the changes in lifestyle that had turned the person into a chronic state of disease. Mm-hmm. And it's only through lifestyle changes and only through radical changes that you can deal with those things. And that's where I realised, actually, it's less of the ego rather than what I can do in treatment to make you, what I can do to you. We realised that the mechanic is just simply opening up cables, opening up life force, improving the structural alignment, improving mobility and those kind of things, in order that the body can then do the healing that it needs. But actually on a much deeper level, it needs a much more holistic approach. So I've gone from the mechanical side at the beginning, and then that started that long sort of 15-year journey into sort of nature cure and old naturopathic styles, of taking on this myriad of lifestyle stuff that you're just effectively giving tools to the person to do all of the cleaning themselves. And then that was really wonderfully relieving, because I could get back to doing the mechanical stuff rather than trying to change the world, which is where I first left college. It was very much like, we've got this amazing skills, and because you're taught ways that you can do things with the body to really help. But actually, as I said, through treatment crisis, the better you are at that, if you don't deal with the chronicity, you can actually open up Pandora's box and the person's not ready for it. So it started off with the mechanical, it then went through into the lifestyle. And I think for myself, like over the last few years, 3-4 years, has become much more the sort of personal work with the mind, really, and just that, as you were asking, like, where is that intention, where is that person, where is your soul, where is your, and those are some of the things that hold people back from changes. Some people will say that a condition, a chronicity of health was some of the best thing that happened to them, because it allowed them the opportunity to change their life. And what the wonderful thing is to be able to try and inspire some changes before you get to that point. Because the body can do miraculous, wonderful things, but it doesn't mean that you can come back from right at the point of bad situations. And so for myself and my history, it's been, going through the process with my dad, and then for the patients, it's been a wonderful thing of starting to give back that advice all the way through, from treating small little children, babies that I've treated that are now like 17 years old, or, some 10-year-olds that are now like approaching their late 20s, and I've treated them all the way through, or helped them, or given them advice. And that's a really sort of wonderful kind of process, because you're just giving general, what I consider to be right healthcare. It's healthcare, not disease care. It's what we should be doing, is keeping people well and giving them tools to jump to whole new levels of health that they never really realized that they could have achieved. And the obvious thing is then to take people like, terminal 4 cancer, what are we going to do? It's a really difficult situation, and as generations go by, the depth of toxicity is getting worse and worse and worse. And so the ability to do the detoxification that they were doing 50 years or 100 years ago is now extremely difficult, because of the levels, of the depths of that kind of toxemia. But the mind is what changes everything, isn't it? It's the determination or the desire to change. And I think for myself, even just working on myself and us as a family, just working more through that meditative or, work of what's going on and what drives you, what you're thinking about, what you're doing. And that's that really tapping into that electrics or that energy, that vibrant force, which is just, it's this battery within inside of you, but we're all given different sized batteries, and that kind of, so there's these very physical, mental, emotional, environmental aspects, and I just leave you with that kind of omnilateral approach. The more things that you change within your life, and the more chronic you are in the state of health, the more you need an aggressive lifestyle changes in order to go back. So if you're very untoxic, if you're young, you can withstand a lot, you can adapt to a lot, you can do this, but you get to these certain points of lifestyle that there's like real junctions in the road.
Yeah, you've got a center point and you go all the way this way, and you have to come all the way back to then go another way.
Yeah,
there's no real shortcuts.
Yeah, it's layers of an onion, and you get used to that through just taking case histories and seeing people. So it's like a pattern. It is these patterns of depth and deeper and deeper levels of toxicity with certain big events in their lifestyle. Sometimes sometimes big accidents or events that happen or things that happen, and it's like a snowball that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But what's wonderful about it is once you explain it in certain ways, people can see the journey between where they've come from and where they're at. And once you can see the journey and the justification for what's happening, it's not to put guilt, or it's not to just feel bad about it, but you have a way to go backwards.
Yeah, you do.
And that healing mechanism is always there. And so you've got a way backwards, rather than it's just fate, it's unlucky, we don't know why that's happening, so just ignore it. And so I think that's what can drive people. A lot of people say,
I think that hereditary thing as well is it's tough one, because it's a tough one to approach. Like, what, this is hereditary. Everyone in my family tree has had heart disease or an issue, and you're like, well, that couldn't have been going on since the dawn of time.
Yeah, but
so there must have.
You have that with obviously there's differences on many different levels with like identical twins or people. Or if you just take risk factors, many years ago or times before aviation and areas, you had vast populations where people didn't travel; they stayed in the same place.
Yeah.
But there were many different studies that show that when somebody moves from, let's say, rural China to America, that they over a very small amount of time start to take on the risk factors for where they're living.
Sure.
So genetics has a part to play, but it's much more important about the environment. So it's easy to say, oh, my mum's had this or my parents have had that and they've had that, so I'm going to have it as well. So there's nothing really I can do, so I might as well just enjoy and just go nuts. Rather than there's a huge amount of change where if you change that environment, there's no the gene expression doesn't occur. And so it's even...
You've got to hedge your bets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And change that around. And so you have, identical twins or people who live in different places and see how much they change. And people can... And a lifespan of sort of a blood cell is like 3 months. And so you say to people, like, if you start changing your lifestyle, imagine that in
Doesn't
3
happen
months'
over a
time,
weekend.
imagine in 3 months' time, like all the red blood cells in your body will be new. And you go from that, like a 3 month level, right the way to like all tissues of your body are kind of changed over or adapted or new in like 7 years. So every 7 years you get like entire new body. So as you can do that, and that changes as you get older, the metabolic, the creation and the destruction of tissues gets slower, everything's slowing down, but you can still make changes that over if they're sustainable make a huge difference. It's having a factory and just changing the quality of the nails and the wood and the quality of the materials that you're putting into it and what's coming out the other side. If you know, it's so easy to see that, isn't it? Like if you just have a factory or a building and you're only providing like bent nails and balsa wood to build a building, it's not gonna, so the quality of what you put into your body and what you put around it affects everything. And then your vitality or battery life is like how good your builders are, how good your factory life is, how well your plumbing system already works. And so we're given different organs with different anything else, but the most important thing is to be much more in charge of one's health, to take responsibility for those changes. And what's nice about that for me is that then there's never any guilt. It's like I can tell people what the things that they can take on, but whether that actually is adapted or sorry, the mic's gone here. I can't hear. This is dead. There's never any. Oh yeah, that's back. There's never any guilt. You're just giving people the tools, and if they don't want to do that, then it's fine.
Yeah,
it's like
no
I
judgment
can,
attached,
of course
as in
I
what
can
your
I can
decision
give
is.
you treatment to make you feel better every week, but like if you stop sitting like that at your desk, then we can make things change. You can do it, and then you don't have to have certain pains, and I can teach you ways to treat yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and actually the superficial thing that you're coming in with is normally the superficial stuff. We can get rid of that. It's the deeper levels. How far do you want to feel better? How far do you want to be pain free or be healthier in your physical, mental and emotional state, So it's that as I said, omni-lateral approach, taking responsibility and finding ways that actually just make much more sense about helping your body do what it's trying to do anyway, but understand it from a rational, natural perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what are some things that you do in your life? Like your general, what's a good day for you? What's a good day? What's one day and you're like, you've got you go. What's a good day in your life? Waking up,
yeah, I mean,
hydrating.
Yeah, it would be waking up probably an hour before the kids.
Okay.
And doing sort of a 20-minute to half an hour movement practice that was some combination between yoga, breakdancing, movement, balancing, stretching thing.
Yeah, no wrong way to move.
No, yeah, exactly. So just some movement, and then probably like 10 minutes of breath work,
Mm-hmm.
and then like a 15-minute meditation, and then have the kids get up, and then at that point I suppose probably setting some positive intentions for the day, and then probably just trying to manage the fury of the two kids and the energy that kind of erupts from that, and then producing good healthy food. So it would be juicing for the kids, making good smoothies for the juicing for the family, smoothies for the family, setting that kind of thing up if the kids are going off to forest school or they're going out about. But then for me it would definitely be spending a majority of the time outdoors, ideally in some shorts, underwear with bare skin possible outside, and that would be in this environment here it would be outside in the garden. An ideal world would be to have some kind of warm surf, or some cold water, but to be able to just go surfing or thrash my body around in that kind of way. But we're very much enjoying seeing our 7 and 4-year-old kind of growing up, and allowing that provision that we've had. As we said, me and Jasmine have been lucky that we haven't needed or used any medical intervention for over 17-18 years, and that's including having 2 children at home. And so that's not to and within that, that's all about what you do when your kids are feeling ill and what you do when you're ill. That's actually that's the healing part.
Yeah.
And then when you get used to that, you can support that with your patients, but you can do it yourself at home. So it's providing as clean an environment for their optimum provision, but it definitely outdoors, 3-dimensional movement with the kids, some unschooling.
Just touch on that. That's responsibility, isn't it? Because when you feel like, okay, I'm not letting the fear get in to things that possibly could go wrong, you're doing everything you can to mitigate those things. So you're being responsible more so than thinking, I could just pick up the midwife. I'll pick up the doctor. I'll call someone for help, or like, how do I do this? You're actually like thinking about this a lot more.
It's externalizing your power of control. Just saying, it's not my fault. It's not that, and someone take it away for me.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is the biggest learning environment. We've had a huge amount of learning through the last 20 years, but the biggest amount of learning is going through children. Through natural childbirth, bringing up children and trying to provide that potential, and they are the biggest change, aren't they, on a sort of physical, mental and emotional level, because they are just it's just trying to, and for us, learning to unschool ourselves to go backwards, and that's our big learning thing at the moment. Unparent, just trying to, because we broke the conditioning very much of that sort of lifestyle thing a very, very long time ago. And at that time, when we were first out of uni, again, it was it was really alternative and really unspoken about kind of thing. Just like even go back to remembering the first times when we were like traveling and like Facebook turned up. It was like before then. Before all of social media, before all of this kind of presence, it was like we were in these kind of weird learning environments where we were learning a huge amount of this stuff, but it was just so alternative. Yeah. Now it's in papers. You can pick up things about air quality or water quality or diet or movement or lifestyle or environment or learning or natural childbirth. You can see it everywhere, and the internet and the Facebook, social media or whatever. You have so many avenues of learning that you can do. Podcasts, all of these things that just they weren't around 20 years ago.
And so podcasts for me have been the game changer.
Yeah,
just listening with people with no agenda. Talk about things that are truthful and meaningful to them, and learning from that, and following my intuition in terms of who to listen to.
Well, the other thing is like when you've got kids, you don't have time.
No,
so we after my dad passed away, and we decided, right, we're going to go really far. We're going to find all the people around the world and find all of the information out there to provide for ourselves personally as a family first, because it was like so traumatic, but it was also so like we don't want to be that. I don't want to wait till I'm 59 or 70 to retire. It's like, how do we provide the good life now? How do we provide these changes now? And so that's what changed our lifestyle and our diet and all of these practices that we took on and learning. But now, like we were able to have years where we were traveling and just consuming information and books and reading and just like spending time in the van or, traveling and just reading so much and learning so much everywhere. Now you have kids, there's just so little time, so things like podcasts or audibles or listening to this kind of stuff, you can do it driving the kids to school, or you can do it kind of doing the shopping, do it or doing the washing up or whatever, and you can listen to it, because you don't necessarily sometimes have the chance to lie down and spend like 10 hours reading a book, and the speed at which sometimes the severity where one's come to when there's like, oh, this has happened, and actually there's a huge history behind it. What do I do? Like, well, probably the best thing for you to do is for you to just come and live with me for like a week, in order to just make those changes really rapidly, because it's just not something that you can't do drip, drip, drip. You can do drip, drip, drip when you treat little kids or families who are healthy, and you can take them through and you can give them lifestyle advice that just keeps them well and gets them further and further to their potential. But it's what you do when you've got someone really unwell, really toxic, really huge medical intervention. What do you do at that point? You've got to do really a lot really fast, and so that's where people do travel to Mexico, or they travel to Thailand and different places to like just be taken care of in this therapeutic environment, because then they can just leave everything behind. They can just kind of give themselves up and surrender, but then they still have to be taught to go through that.
Absolutely.
So I think what was lucky for us was consuming that vast amount of information and having that lifestyle practice. I'd spent nearly 10 years kind of treating kids and children and babies every day before I had my first child. So I was used to, treating newborn babies and holding them and understanding them on a on a physical, mental, emotional level kind of thing before I held my first kid. But like, if you just have your first child and then you've got to start learning, it's just the philosophy and the lifestyle and everything, it's just kind of too much. So ideally what we can do with people is just give them drip effect, so that when something starts to happen, when the red flags start to appear, or when they decide, you know what, I really want to feel better on a many different levels, or specifically here, then you've got a way to go to, rather than I don't know,
and on that, I think what was natural for us for hundreds of thousands of years, if not longer, nearly a millennia, was surviving, thriving in tribes where we would look after everyone's young, right?
Yeah.
And that was a natural template, which still is in the natural humans of the world.
Yeah.
The more natural, the more connected. And we can go our whole teens, adulthood without even having any interaction with children.
Yeah.
And people are almost like,
oh yeah, I mean, there were
put off.
Yeah, number of families that I treated with the dad's like never held a baby. Literally, what do I do with this thing? I've seen in the films, I might hold it like this. That dexterousness, that time, as you said, in communities where you got 7 and 8 year olds who are the ones who are carrying around the babies and like doing that.
Whose kids, whose mum was who, in certain tribes. In Chris Ryan's book, Sex at Dawn, if you've looked at that, he talks about how the men would go off to hunt, and then they would leave the children with, obviously, the women, and they would all take care of everyone else. So if I didn't come back, there'd be many other fathers to take care and raise the child. Yeah,
and it's, again, just living in that natural environment where I think the thing that I can just try and leave people with is there are huge amounts of podcasts or information out there, whether it's cold water showering, cold water bathing, for example, or upregulating or down-regulating breathing, or meditation, or huge amounts of variant different movement, or dietary advice. There's enormous amounts of information out there, and it's when you explain it on an individual level, everyone's just like, of course. Why would you not? But we should really be teaching all of those things to children, right? We should be helping newborn babies and children breathe right and stand right and develop right and feeding them right and providing all of these things. But people can look into each individual modality. What I love and what my passion is trying to just do all of it, provide all of it at once, because obviously I'm driven more right the way from day one of just trying to find that alternative when you have someone who's got really bad stages of cancer, and they've gone through many years of red flags that have been just suppressed, and no information, no education has been given to that person as to the things that are going wrong that they should clearly change. And my passion is taking some of those people and giving them advice that just is groundbreaking and life changing and affirming, and even if those people have got no chance left, then you can still make ridiculous changes and make everything, the quality, so much better. But try and combine as many factors in your life at health as possible. Don't stack all your bets on just the changing of the diet, or that, just to realize that there are all of these modalities of lifestyle living. It is a lifestyle.
It's not just something you do on weekends. It is a lifestyle.
Yeah, and practitioners like myself or different people are there to support you, but we're not the person. We're not the magic pill. We can't do it for you.
Well, I think that you're really empowering people, emotionally, physically.
Just there to support their lifestyle changes, which are.
Okay,
huge.
I want to ask you a question. I think you'd have a good answer, and you'll probably come to it quite quick. If there was one thing you could tell the whole kind of world, if the whole world was listening, and they would do exactly what you said, what one thing would you say introduce to people? What one thing, just one of perhaps the principles which you'd say, I know this goes against everything you're about, because it's all encompassing, but just as a way in, perhaps.
Yeah, keep moving.
Movement.
But like, but there's movement, isn't there, on all different levels. It's just like keeping moving emotionally and keeping moving mentally.
I think the body
but the
moves first.
but body structure wise, movement of blood, movement of lymph, movement of nerve force, movement, all of these things. But moving your body, being static is just so bad for you. So I spend my time like either with people who are just like, I'm a writer, I'm a seamstress, I'm a this. I spend 8 hours at a desk. I'm a what do I do? Like apart from driving, because you can't necessarily kneel and change your shape from out of the driving position.
I wonder if there's a market for some kind of inventive car that allows you to sit right, squat right, or like
freedom of movement. But I suppose it's probably going to be it's more like automotive cars.
Got a really high roof, so I was like stretching my hand up.
You find ways, don't you, of like holding onto things and moving your body around. But yeah, I think that osteopathically wise, again, like if we can start moving and producing low grade, high repetitious, 3-dimensional movement. Walking is a game changer. Walking, swinging your arms, looking at the horizon, looking up and breathing, the movement of your breath, pump in fresh oxygen, pump blood.
I always notice when I've gone without needing the toilet all day and I go out for a walk, I need the toilet. It's like, yes, because my body's pumping and it's moving and juicing all the muscles and joints. And then I need the toilet. Of course you do, because your body's alive. It's
massaging, we kind of know if you're in a hospital or a 24-hour flight to Australia, that people are like, you've got to get up, you've got to keep moving. It's DVT, it's danger, it's just stasis. So you take a goldfish bowl, or you stop the movement of oxygen.
If that plane does go down, how long do you think it's going to take you to get back up?
Like it, if a stream, if you block it off, if there's no movement, it suddenly becomes stagnant, and then that's when the algae grows. That's when the parasites and those kind of things. You introduce just a tiny entrance to the stream and an exit, or you introduce the oxygen bubble into a fish tank or whatever, and suddenly it has oxygenation, it has movement. And on a cellular thing, we are all vibration, aren't we? So vibration and movement. So that's the most important thing. And it's through mobility that suddenly you get the fresh air, and you get this sun, and you get the movement, and then you feel better for moving, so you sleep more and you rest better. And it works with your hormones. It works with your energies. It makes you feel better. It's meditative. It's breaking away from that, and then rediscovering these things that are inherently natural to our body, but we enjoy. And from a mechanical perspective, it's just kind of obvious. It's just WD-40ing your joints, and it's just stretching tissues that are not there to be completely stagnant. So I would say move.
Nice.
Move your body.
On the floor.
Yeah.
So where do people find you? Let's chat about that. Your website and here as well, and tell people perhaps the future holds.
Yeah, so website to find me and my wife, who we trained together in osteopath. She's a yoga teacher. She's a healthful mother, bringing up two beautiful children.
Social media?
She is. So I'm NatureCure Family on Instagram, Facebook. You can find us at NatureCure Life. Our website is www.myhealthandhappiness.co.uk. And Jasmine is in the midst of providing a sort of health platform, which will be called Health Collaborated. The website is being created in order for us to try and take these multitude of lateral approaches to the body and provide a sort of learning and open tool for people to kind of discover all the things that we've been looking to discover over those years. So you can find us on our website as far as yoga and osteopathic and NatureCure lifestyle, whether it's Zoom or in person. The website will be hopefully up and running at some point in the next year, and providing a sort of real good learning platform for people. As far as treatment is concerned, I run a practice here, which is in Stroud, in the Shepherd's Huts outside, and I've had a practice for nearly 20 years in London, so that's in West London in Chiswick. So people can just contact us through website or social media and go through it that way. You still
visit for?
Yeah, I still go back now every couple of weeks to West London, because I've had so many people over the 20 years, and there are not too many people who have got this kind of philosophy or healthcare system. So I've still got a good tribe of people who I look after, and then there's always the next family or someone member. So usually I've had people who have found me through doing these podcasts recently or little videos, but normally it's just I know specifically who it's come from, not like a yellow pages I found you. You know, it's always a little bit more difficult.
It always feels like that you know each other before you've even met.
Yeah, with a lot of this, you know, I almost don't need to do this, you know, hour and a half or 2 hours of like really unwrapping and just totally unwinding, because they've already heard it. They've heard it from somebody else. Yeah. And then it just makes a lot of sense, and they need someone to hold their hand and guide them, and then just give them that support, as well as giving them that structural kind of help or treatment. And what we look to plan to do, which again will happen slowly, and it's been changed around a little bit because of our current climate, but is to run CPD, or what we like to call CPPD, so continued professional as well as personal development, which we obviously did as osteopaths or yoga teachers or those kind of things, but it's also trying not to do it just from a professional level, but just personal level, so people can come and stay here, and we would do that full nature cure kind of seminars. And we're trying to set up more kind of pods on the land where people can come and have little retreats, that kind of thing, because sometimes it is a lot easier to have somebody for half a day or a whole day in order to kind of immerse yourself in this, because there's just so much information, and there's so much scope for how far. So yeah, the ideal is to run teaching events, to run retreats here, to have people on the land, as well as to doing that one-to-one. And then through Jasmine creating this health collaborated platform in order to present that kind of information for other people, that they, you know, as you said, do it over the phone. Just, you know, you don't need the therapist, you don't need to have the addiction to supplementation, but you don't need to have just the alternative medicine that you need to have all the time. It's there, and it can be for free. It's just trying to implement those things in your life and take the responsibility, take the power back. So yeah, find me here in Stroud, find me here in London, and Instagram, Facebook, website.
Exciting. Love it, man. Appreciate you so much.
Yeah,
I think
you're
really doing
nice.
valuable work.
Thank you.
I really do.
It's it feels good, feels nice, and it's empowering. It just is nothing better than having people who make those changes, and then it's the texts and the messages and the calls that are just filled with just bountiful happiness. And also just is supporting people in the difficult times, and it's just trying to find that way of managing that. It's not out there a huge amount as to how to manage illness, how to manage and obviously at the moment people need that the most, as to what to do when they're feeling rubbish, and just to understand it from slightly different levels, and to make the changes that improve your life on many different levels, that improve your homeostatic balance with your environment. You know, that's what's going to be very, very, very important over the years to come, is kind of just understanding yourself on these very simple levels.
Yeah, because the world's going in a very crazy direction.
Yeah, just people are going to need more self-empowerment.
Yeah, and time.
Just time to
away.
just to see themselves on many different levels.
Sure. All right, man.
Thanks very much.
For ages, we'll cut it there.
People will be far asleep by now.
But yeah,
really appreciate the time and chatting about it all.
All right, man. Thanks so much.